Welcome to Healing the Spirit, a space where we awaken our creativity, deepen our connections, and remember who we are through the lens of astrology, archetypes, and art making. I'm your host, Jonathan Coe. Hello everyone, welcome to Healing the Spirit, and I'm really excited to be sharing with you a conversation I just recorded with one of my dearest friends, one of my mentors, and a deeply wise woman, Britten LaRue. Some of you may already know that my journey with astrology and studying astrology seriously really began with me seeking out a reading from Britten. And throughout the years, we've grown, together and separately. And I'm really excited to be sharing this conversation with you because it feels so in the moment. It feels so emergent for both of us. And it's also centered around what I feel is one of the essence of Britten's teachings and Britten's work, which is a framework she is calling the Emergent No. And you'll hear her talk about the Emergent No within the conversation. But I feel like sharing here at the beginning with you as someone who has worked alongside Britten and someone who has been one of her clients. This is something that Britten has really helped me with, that the idea of listening to my Emergent No, tending to it, and allowing myself to even begin becoming aware, of something that isn't feeling quite right, and then letting myself and my guides and the unseen fabric of reality assist me in kind of moving out of the situation I'm currently in into a different one. This is deep, deep mystery teaching, This is what a lot of mystics talk about, right? Because essentially, I feel at the heart of it, and this is really filtered through my lens, I feel that at the heart of Emergent No is this awareness that our desires, our impulses, the seemingly random intuitive hit that is within us, they're really not just coming from us. They're really not just random fancy, but rather deep wisdom of the universe that wants to speak through us, right? And that wants to be experienced through us, and some version of dream reality that really is only able to be birthed by us and our unique selves. So this is something that Britten has taught me across years of working together. And Britten has also taught me how to hold, all the fears that can come up with that, right? All the resistance, all the shame that can come up from wanting something that isn't currently present in your reality, and the challenging emotions that can come up from even acknowledging that. So I want to allow you to get into this conversation with Britten. Britten introduces herself in the conversation. I feel like most of you listening, or many of you listening, have already known Britten, but if you don't know Britten yet, this is your introduction to Britten, and I promise you it is a beautiful introduction. Thank you so much for being here with us, and here is my conversation with Britten LaRue. Welcome, Britten, to Healing the Spirit.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's an honor.
I'm always so excited to chat with you because I feel like each time I get to have a conversation with you, there's just such deep magic and relational holding that I feel. So, yeah, thank you for being here. And a part of me feels like you don't need any introduction for my audience, but who knows? Maybe someone is new. So, yeah, I'm curious how you would introduce yourself and your work, and yeah, and where you are today.
Yeah, my name is Britten LaRue. I am a teacher, lifetime teacher, and a recovering academic. I like to say. That feels important to me to say because I am unlearning how I relate to notions such as expertise and perfection, and the right to speak and the right to share. And I came to astrology as the discipline through which I speak. I hold microphones at a time when I was in a crossroads period of change and transformation, and astrology came to help me trust that new ways of being are possible.
Yeah.
So now, as a writer, my first book is being published in March of 2024, Living Astrology. I also have self-published workbooks on astrology. My teachings, my clients, my work is primarily around helping individuals who want to trust in new ways of being and who want to explore a mystical, magical approach to healing change. I'll let me help you arrive into that, and invite you to find others who can also help you explore new ways of being through magical lenses.
Wow. So much is coming up for me. The first one I'm curious about is if you want to talk a little bit about what the phrase living astrology means to you, specifically because I know the last time, or I don't think it was the last time actually, the first time you came into Healing the Spirit, our conversation was centered around the idea of emergence astrology, right? Yeah. And I feel like this idea of living astrology is very much connected to that in my mind, but I'm curious to hear how that feels for you.
I think it just it unfolded really naturally because my workbook series, as you know, is called Living the Signs, and there's one for every sign.
Yeah.
And I wrote these to share how I was relating to the signs as realms through which to support us in new ways of being, with the idea that each of the 12 signs is like a portal to a realm, and
Mm-hmm.
there's so much to explore for healing and aliveness and joy and basically being human.
Yeah.
I have a very synthetic approach to everything, and so I like to synthesize astrology with things I've learned all my life, and
Mm.
other disciplines.
Yeah. Yeah.
So something that came to me in writing Living Astrology was, I think the line is, astrology isn't something that happens to you, it's something that you live.
Mm.
And I really feel I really feel like astrology is like a love language from the cosmos to help us trust in being here.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you're with me on this.
Totally. Totally.
Yeah. And I just am so grateful to the way it came in. And I love sharing that approach with others, since it's not the style of astrology or the approach that you often see. And so,
Yeah.
but here it is for us.
Yeah. 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 I feel, as someone who has worked with you as a student, a client, a collaborator, um, I've really found that your courage, and maybe it's not even courage, but like your willingness to follow that desire or that impulse to synthesize is actually deeply um, encouraging for me and like emboldening, because as a fellow Jupiterian person, I also find myself, you know, I just was doing a reading last night and I was like, was that even an astrology reading? And there's a part of me that like really had to hold myself against, this projection that sometimes we can experience, right? Like doing this work comes with a certain expectation, like this is what astrology looks like, or this is what healing work looks like. And I think one of the things I've really learned from you as someone who studied with you is the willingness, to kind of go there into the places that maybe feel like, what are we even doing, right? Which is so human in some ways. I think I'm also remembering in an Instagram post, you mentioned something about like, what I love the most about astrology is that it's preposterous or something like
Yes.
that. That just came into my mind as I was saying that, because there is something kind of, I don't know, trickstery, magician-y, that it almost feels like, is this even real? Or like, what
Mhm.
even is this? Right? I think that's maybe where it comes in more for me, around like, what is this? What are we even doing? But I do think that what I love about the framework of emergence astrology and living astrology is that there is an acknowledgement of that. You're also, I've heard you talk a lot about collecting evidence and data from one's own life and one's own journey. And that is a beautiful concept that's really hard to live, Britain. Because
Mhm.
sometimes we just don't want to. Sometimes we are
That's
like,
right.
give me the books. So maybe I'm circling back to what you were saying earlier about being a recovering academic, because there is also for me a part of my being that wants to be like, I want to do all the research. I want to be able to control the outcome, right, of this
Mhm.
experiment. Hmm.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me how, I mean, even in scholarship, there when you're in the source materials, like when you're in the archives, there is often a dread that accompanies the experience, because what if you find material that disputes your working hypothesis? Like, well, now what?
Yeah.
This
Right.
material is here, so you're going to just pretend it doesn't exist so that you can push through the story that you're trying to push through for your paper?
Mm-hmm.
Or are you now going to work with the new data, which is going to mean opening up all kinds of more work for yourself? But maybe there's something you have to trust, that like you can look at all the material and a interesting story is going to unfold, but it may not be the story that you thought it was going to be when you started doing your research. And I feel like that's all,
Yes.
right? Like, this is why we don't want to look at all the evidence. Is like, I have a really good story for how I am and how my life works. And if I look at that data, then it's going to mean that, I'm going to have to question my whole reality story,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there's intelligence behind periods of life, when there are times where we just really don't have capacity for doing that kind of data
Yeah.
looking.
Yeah.
But then there are times when we do. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm curious to hear you speak about how you feel astrology helps us with that process of looking at the data, maybe even contextualizing the data and seeing where it takes us. What do you think the role of astrology is in that in that way of living, moving through the world?
What comes to me is just like, appreciating who is my teacher right now. Like, real-time astrology, like chart of the moment astrology, helps us understand like the curriculum. I mean, I'm a nerd, so I'm going to tell it through. I'm going to use like school language.
Bring it on.
But it's like, if you're in a science class, like, what are you going to bring in your bag for your science class? You know what I mean? And or
Yeah.
how can I orient towards like, this is what I'm in,
Mm-hmm.
If you want literature in science, it might be really frustrating or something like this, right? And so I feel like astrology really helps me like nuzzle up to my teachers, my cosmic teachers that are right here, and ask the appropriate questions,
Wow.
and let the questions that I bring to the teacher begin to unfold me into like a new way, or a new type of quote unquote answer that's not really an answer, but it's something that supports me.
Yeah.
Whatever's going on right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that feels very Page of Cups, Knight of Cups to me. Yeah. So I'm aware that one of the reasons we wanted to have this conversation loosely was because we wanted to speak about one of the frameworks that you have introduced. I think you may have introduced it last year. Is that true, Britten? Like in 2022?
The Emergent No.
The Emergent No, yeah.
It was actually Taurus season 2021. We were in the first edition table. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. Okay. Because I was, there was a part of me that was like, oh no, we're not going to do research. And then there was an Emergent No. coming towards not doing research.
Yeah, right.
So then I found, a series of really illuminating, beautiful posts that you shared on Instagram around 2022. Actually, I think this was when you were around the time you were sharing Abundance Begins with No workshop, right? Okay. So it feels to me like maybe this is kind of an annual pilgrimage for you to kind of come back to this, but also maybe this idea of the emergent no and vulture magic is so pervasive and so structural maybe to a lot of your work. I'm curious to hear, first of all, what the emergent no is for you at this moment.
So I wonder if going to the beginning, the origin of the phrase would be illuminating.
Sure.
So I was going through a breakup that was a shock when it hit, but in hindsight, we can often see that there were signposts that it was ending, But at the time, I was in a raw space of shock and rage and pain and disbelief. And I kept pulling Eight of Cups. And for what I started to see is that there was something about the situation that was a walk away. It was a walk away from something that maybe had been under the surface, but had emerged. And that was the no to the relationship. And I was like, yeah, it was a no. It was an emergent no. And so the way I started to see this phrasing is that it's like there are things in our life that some part of us knows are not working, or it's not alive. It's like missing some kind of zest or juice. It's gone stagnant. Eight of Cups in the Thoth deck is shows like putrid green waters that have gone stagnant. And then in other Eight of Cups, you see someone walking away. So I feel like the Eight of Cups speaks to the entire trajectory from like living with this like kind of sickly water, from like a lack of aliveness or a lack of movement, all the way through the experience of like recognizing this is what the problem is, and I'm seeing the problem. It's that I don't like this anymore. I don't want this anymore. Or there's some kind of no, to like, I'm going to act on the no. I'm going to do this. I'm going to leave. And so to me, that emergent no, now that I've been living with it and like talking about it, and so I talk about it usually mostly Taurus Scorpio, because I feel it's very connected to the life, death, life axis. The Taurus Scorpio illuminates.
Yeah.
Is that things die. Like, whoa. And also things are born, and like just like back and forth into that axis, which has been a healing experience for me as someone who experienced the fact of death too soon through the death of my father, and basically like needed to just stay away from all death, all closure, all change, and just keep it comfortably unchanged, Keep it comfy. which had its own intelligence for my younger self. That was part of survival. But the Eight of Cups is like calling in the capacity to recognize that something isn't working in a whatever, like a relationship, a job, a place, a way of being, a way of like looking through the world through a certain kind of lens, a way of engaging with reality. Like you could apply it to anything inside, interior or exterior to your life as like, as an experience of suddenly awakening to basically, I don't like this, or I'm not comfortable with this, or this isn't working, this isn't alive.
Yeah.
And I'm willing to see this. And I honestly don't think it always means death. It just means like looking at it and then beginning to orient towards what do I want to do? You know, do I want to update the situation? Do words need to be spoken? Like, what needs to happen for me to get back into an aliveness, which is energy is moving because I'm orienting towards this is here, this data is here. And the emergent no is not comfortable because, like I like to say, not every no is a fuck no.
Yeah.
You know, like those are fabulous. It's so great when there's a fuck no, you know, because it's like clear. The emergent no isn't usually clear because it has all this other stuff around it that's uncomfortable because it's going to mean change.
Yeah.
And we have like intelligent reasons inside of us for not wanting the change. And so I think the emergent no appears when some part of us is like, I think I'm ready to be with the consequences of my not noticing this before and begin to orient towards some kind of shift that creates aliveness again.
Yes. Yes. Wow, that's delicious. I have so many questions, but I kind of want to read some of your words back to you. Is that okay? From Instagram like a year ago. So this is across a few different posts, but you wrote, the emergent no is from this deep knowing inside of you that if you don't assert your no, there will be something dying and rotting in your life. The emergent no is the no that rises forth from concealment. We just suddenly know the no is present. We get a whiff of the stench coming from the putrefaction of stagnant waters. The emergent no is the no that bubbles into consciousness when you are ready to name and act on the fact that something is over and done with in your life. A relationship, a habit, a limiting self-belief, a job, a place. The emergent no is the no in your life that begins to become conscious to you. I love this. And I feel like I see both the growth and the evolution of how you've been living alongside this framework, and also kind of a anchoring, too. Like there's something about how you are phrasing this that I think has, in many ways, stayed the same, but I love how I'm hearing it differently as someone who has, been around your work for some time. Yeah.
Well, you know that I like to share what's in the kitchen before I even understand what's happening. It's like, I like to think of it as like, I share from the current, I'm in the research lab or whatever. And I like to think of it as like giving my future self something to keep working on, So it's like each 6 months I come back to this, and it's like I I have this body of language of how I have talked about it, but then I like to sit
Mm.
with it now. And it's like, what is this? How does it want to move through me now that I'm this much older and moved through this many more things and talked to this many more humans about their own experiences with these types of experiences, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Something that's coming through for me recently is really feeling into the emergent no experience as an awakening of intuition. It's like part of the reason that we maybe weren't seeing things, like, because you could have an emergent no say in your about your marriage for decades,
Yes.
you
Right.
know,
Right.
decades, where there may be these moments where you're like, oh my gosh, I don't think I want to be married. And then you go back down. Like it
Mm-hmm.
goes back down because some parts of you don't not have the tools and circumstances for being with it, you
Or
know?
your job. Yeah.
Yes.
Which is also a kind of marriage, I suppose.
Yes. And I think one of the things that we do when we don't want to look at it is like what we start to do is like put logic on it.
Mm.
And it's like, what would be my logic for quitting this? What's the logical thing? And we start trying to explain. And once we moved into like explanations and logic, we start moving away from the information that was intuitive, which is, I don't like this. And it's like a feeling of knowing, of just like, this isn't good for me, you
Yeah.
know? And then logic comes in and we just shut off that connection to the knowing because we don't know how we'll explain it, or even
Mm.
to ourselves, you know.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
all the logical things come up like, well, what would I do, da, 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 you know. And then it's just like, we just let release ourselves from the knowing that was trying to emerge for us.
Yeah.
So I feel like this relates to something that I think about in terms of the phrase an injunction against looking, which I think may come from Women Who Run with the Wolves
Mm.
by Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes, this phrase injunction against looking, this idea of like learning to just not look because like you need to be safe, you need to be nice, you need to be like follow the rules. You need to not be difficult. Don't be disruptive. You know,
Mm-hmm.
just follow this order and be a good adult, you know.
Mm.
And so this injunction against looking at the data of our lives cuts us off from our intuition because the intuitive parts of us can see very clearly,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so what feels like is really flowering for me right now is weaving this teaching with like larger teachings around intuition that I'm interested in speaking with anyone who wants to come into my space, you know?
Yeah. 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 It's like the phrase that's coming to my mind is the cost of following your intuition.
The costs, yeah.
Yeah, because you definitely pay a price, right? If not in the long run, in the short run, there are losses that you will have to experience, and in some ways, I feel personally for myself at times in my life where I have resisted listening to my intuition. It's because I'm not ready to uh, turn my gaze towards building the resources that I need in order to live the life that my intuition is leading me into, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it asks you to, if you want to not just receive the insights in like, sixth chakra level, right? Seventh chakra level. If you want to actually live it out, through your third, right? Through your second, through your first chakra, um, you have to be ready for it, right? and your being has to orient towards it. And sometimes like real changes need to be made. Sometimes they are really subtle. Like maybe I need to wake up earlier, like 1 hour earlier to like go for a run, right? But sometimes we just don't want to move out of that space. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think this is where it weaves in with my interest in shame. As you know, I have this project this year called Unshaming the Signs.
Mm-hmm.
I think that one of the biggest consequences of shame is lack of self-trust, and self-trust is intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, like, for me, when I think about my younger self, who I love so much, like, really struggled to trust herself. Just did not think I could be responsible for the way that, like, the kind of path my intuition wanted to take me into. It's, to me, it's kind of miraculous that I fell into this path. Like, there just was an opening where enough self-trust came in. And then astrology came in to like really lift me up and carry me to a place where I could like really trust it without a whole lot of evidence.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and we're coming back to that idea of evidence. Like, when you don't have a lot of evidence that following something like an emergent no is something that you can trust yourself through, it is like a leap that we need. You know, it's going to have to be a leap to trust that we can find the skills, the teachers, the resources to help us build that strength inside that says, I trust not only in myself, but I trust that I can find the support seen and unseen that's available to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you think gives us or has the potential to give us the courage and strength necessary to start tending to our emergent no, Britten?
You know, maybe I'm just going to say what came to me, and it makes me a little teary. Maybe we can trust in the two archetypes of the Eight of Cups, the teacher that is Saturn and the teacher that is Pisces, the way of being that is Pisces. Yeah. And through Saturn, trusting in like turning towards yourself, like making a commitment to turn towards yourself and build up some structures. I've said before, Saturn will save your life. Like, Saturn is a teacher to help you create some ground beneath you through like a drying out process of ordering your life. And so, like, what are the Saturnian teachers? Like, maybe the Saturnian teacher is time, like working with time more magically, like through ordering your day, leaning into some Saturnian structure, I think can really help you when you feel in the midst and the fogs of being separated from your knowing. But I have to say Pisces is pretty powerful too, because I have to believe in a dream, you know, and I think that tapping into a larger dream for this world and having the audacity to believe in it is a very potent thing to nuzzle up against. Yeah. And probably we created an injunction against looking as children because the world was telling us that those dreams were silly, that that's not the world that we live in. Yeah. You know, and so calling on like the magical child part of us that is a Pisces, I think that's like really putting on like a full energy, a full cloak, because it's going to like lift yourself through people not understanding the moves that you're now making.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, to me, what you're speaking to is like this liminal space, right? Where the previously hidden no, right, is becoming emergent and actually is growing into like a fuck no. You know? And that space is actually, there's so much heartbreak in that space, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
I think working through the heartbreak while also moving into creating new structures, right? Because I think when we're thinking about structures, I've been thinking about what does it mean to actually create structures, like even in my apartment, you know? In order for me to create structures, I have to toss away a bunch of shit. I can't buy a new bookshelf if I don't have space in my apartment. You know, that's just the law of manifest reality, right? That's just the law of like the tangible plane of reality. And so I think often when I think back on my life, oftentimes the the period where I'm needing to create structures, those are the same periods that coincide with letting go of other things, right? And so it's like it can feel so intense because it's like as you're releasing, you're also building, and it's almost like that can feel almost the word I'm looking for is like it can freeze you a little bit, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one of the structures that I brought in right before astrology found me was like the morning journaling.
Mm-hmm.
But what I talk to people about with journaling is like, do not do this if it's like, oh, I'm supposed to do this because this is what people do when they're trying to be healthy or something like that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
boring, you know, like so boring. Like, you have to, it needs to come from a place of like, my life is so important. I'm journaling as if the whole world depends on me logging the data of my life. Like,
Mm.
I think about RuPaul's Drag Race and like lip sync for your life, like this energy of like lip sync for your life, you know, like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Scorpio, RuPaul. Um, like seriously, like it is such a big deal, you know, if it's not coming from this energy of like wild uh glory, the glory of like what I'm going to write today. um it's not really actually creating structure. It's going to be like a thing that, you know, you're kind of shaming yourself into and like
Mm.
do something else, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then like night walking under the moon was an early one for me, and it was just like me walking in the night with myself is like the most magnificent, most glorious, most important thing on the planet right now.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds
Mm-hmm.
over the top, but sometimes you really have to get to that over the top place to remember that you are important,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
It is important to pay attention to your life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's why that's why you log it. It's because your life is so important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's such deep healing that often I think needs to happen with Saturn, right? I love that you brought up this shame fueled journaling. Like I must journal, otherwise my healing will not continue, or something like that. That I mean, I went through this a couple of years ago, actually. And I think recently I've been really avidly journaling and just going through journal after journal. And I'm like, what is happening here? And I realized that actually there's been a release, around the rigidity that a few years ago I carried with me, with this idea of like having a practice or having, yeah, I think this idea of practice, right? Even the word practice brings up so much within us, because many of us who love the idea of practice came from experiences of practicing that are very maybe results oriented, right? That maybe we were really good at, but still held some sort of kind of contraction around it. And then the people who didn't like it, maybe felt like they failed at whatever they were practicing, And so I think it's not a neutral word, I'm realizing. Practice is not a neutral word because we have put so much onto it, and I think part of cultivating a practice is to look at, what am I carrying, right? What are the psychic pictures, what are the stories, the narratives that I'm carrying with this idea of practice? And journaling is absolutely a practice, right?
Yeah, it really is. And it just comes back to the shame piece again. Like when we're doing things because like we want to be a good person, and good people journal, good healing people journal, there's a deadness to that energy,
Yeah, exactly.
The Saturn, like we're talking about, right, is like this kind of like, I'm the boss, I'm not journaling today, but there's not going to be shame there. It's like, I can decide that because I'm the one who's running this practice.
Yeah. And also, I think similarly, I've been thinking about how our emergent authentic practice also runs through us, and runs us in some ways. Like the other day, I was sitting down ready for my Akashic journaling practice, and then a friend of mine reached out, and started sending all these voice memos, and I felt the pull to respond, So then my morning practice was actually connecting with a friend.
Yay. Yes.
And it was like, it was really interesting because in that moment where consciously I allowed myself to be with that, I realized that, my practice today is actually about connection. What does it look like to connect with another being, to share and to allow myself to be seen in that microcosm of the world, right? Yeah.
I do think like it's powerful to like learn a template or like be inspired by a template, be motivated by a template from outside of us, but the templates I'm interested in teaching, sharing will always be ones that are like highly adaptable, because the power and the magic comes from like knowing that you are the template. Like the template comes from inside of me, and because I am the Saturn, and Saturn is in me and with me and through me, and that's how I know that I can also look at the things in my life. It's because of building that kind of bone power,
Yeah. Here's what I want to talk to you about, which is that sometimes I think we can carry a lot of shame unknowingly about doing internal processes. And then when we finally decide to commit, right, to maybe tending to an emergent no that's coming up for us, all of the shame that we've internalized around looking at ourselves and prioritizing what is coming up for us, our intuition, our needs, can kind of start running the show, you know?
Mm.
And it can feel like, I don't know, for me personally, like there's this fear of being selfish. You know, there's this fear of like I'm a good person. I don't want to perpetuate individualism, you know,
Mm.
like this kind of thinking, right? And I don't think I'm alone. I'm curious what you would say to that. How have you noticed within yourself or within people that you work with, students and clients, how do we move through this, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, like I think it can be very helpful to be with the truth that whether we look at it or not, there are consequences
Mm.
In all of our relationships and in our ecosystems when we're not attuning to our own intuitive pathways. And I mean, my not looking at the problems, say, in my marriage, like can take my breath away when I feel into the harm that I caused in my just sorrow, anger, resentment, sadness, frustrations, you know,
Yeah.
the dysfunction that was a consequence of my not getting to the heart of it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a huge example. But I think just in very micro ways, those are the signals to me that there's an emergent no before we even know it. There's like a measure of frustration, resentment, even like a meanness that comes out of us, and then we feel shame about that because we're like, oh shit, what's wrong with me? Like, why am I acting like that? You know?
Yeah.
And I think that we can reorient when we remember that there's consequences. There's going to be consequences
Either
to our
way.
truth.
Yeah.
So it's like calling in trust, calling in love, calling in compassion, to trust that we have the courage to have the conversations, and both the internal conversations and the external conversations, to name what we want to update and what we're not doing anymore, you know?
Yeah.
And often it is, even if in the moment the person or the situation is unhappy with this new energy coming in, because it is new energy. It is the energy of truth being spoken and the aliveness that comes with that. Trusting that ultimately the waves move through, but it is what's best for everyone. I really trust in that.
Yeah. Ooh, that gave me chills, because I think this idea of consequences is deeply connected to something that came through for both of us when we were facilitating astrology as praxis, Britten, which is the idea of the cosmic body, right? And I'm not going to go too deep into defining or explaining what the cosmic body is, but to me, the heart of connecting with the cosmic body has to do with understanding that the universe is fractal, right? And we are not just part of the universe, but we are the universe, And so what is stirring within us, what we're choosing to listen to, or what we're choosing to ignore, is also kind of connected to a greater cosmic web, I feel it's interesting because I found this passage in this book I'm currently reading, The Tao of Craft by Annabelle Wen. And she was talking about the idea of chi and the idea of kind of the universal chi and the personal chi. And is it okay if I read a little bit and just kind of, bring it into this little tiny world that we have here? So this is what Annabelle wrote in this book. Chi is life force, the breath that brings vitality. Chi is the unseen impetus behind all change, creative or destructive, whether it is initiation, continuation, transformation, or cessation. A theoretical principle presumed by the craft that will be presented in this book is the relationship between two characterizations of chi that I'll refer to as personal chi and cosmic chi. Personal chi is the individual circuit of vital energy flowing through each one of us. Cosmic chi is the principle that each one of our individual circuits is connected to every other, and a unifying connection of circuits emerges to form a collective energy force. The transactions and occurrences of cosmic chi have a direct and relational impact on each individual circuit of personal chi. That concept can be likened to the Western occult maxim, as above, so below, where events that happen at the macrocosm will also happen at the microcosm. Thus, a practitioner who understands his or her own personal chi, who understands the self, can gain the wisdom of fully understanding the cosmic chi, or understanding the universe. To know yourself is to know the universe. Study of the universe and the physical and metaphysical realities of the universe is thus a study of yourself. When the way of the macrocosm is veiled to you, look to the way of the microcosm, and then the mystery will be unveiled. That is the foundation from which you will build your knowledge of craft.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that such a juicy passage?
Yeah, as you were speaking, what I was hearing, it's just like, if you have been conditioned to have this injunction against looking at your own pain, at your own disempowerment, you will also grow an injunction against looking at the pain of other people and their disempowerment. And likewise, if you have an injunction against looking at the ways that you're not in your pleasure and in your aliveness, then it will start to not be important to you to care about the pleasure and aliveness of other people.
Yeah.
And really just rooting. It's just rooting and rooting and rooting. It's like Taurus Scorpio, rooting into this. The more and more I feel it, the more like I feel it for everyone, just like you just want to like do standing ovations for people when they name what they're not doing anymore, And would you be able to give them a standing ovation if what that meant was that they needed to go on their own and leave whatever you had going on with them? Or would you even have a standing ovation if, it was going to be sad for you? Like, I'm inviting us all to like consider how amazing that would be if we could be supportive of one another that way,
Yeah. That is the medicine of the Eight of Cups, Mm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Queen of Cups.
I want to bring in vulture magic, Britten, because this is
Mhm.
part of your work as well. And I think there was a post, maybe I read this. I can't I think I read it right, but I may be mistaken. But I think you had said something about how the emergent no is vulture magic and vulture magic is emergent no. That the two concepts are like deeply linked. Yeah, what comes up for you?
Yeah. Okay, so that came from the same period of time. I said both for the first time in the same podcast episode. It was like one of my dark moon downloads of that spring.
Mm.
And I was also at that time, I kept pulling the Justice card in the Brady Tarot, which you gave me, which shows a turkey vulture with scales. And in one side of the scales is a skull, and in the other side is an egg. And it has, there's a guidebook written by Rachel Pollack for the Brady Tarot. And in it, she talks about vultures and their incredible capacity to support the ecosystem by cleansing corpses, and learned about how the ancient Egyptians, saw vultures as female and self-generating as a symbol of transformation and renewal. And what was coming up for me at that time was like this invitation to feast on my experience of grief and closure and endings. And I saw this image of myself like feasting on the carcass of
Mm.
this dead relationship with like grease running down my chin and breasts, and just like calling in new life and like impregnating myself with the food of the dead.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I named this, and we share like the quirky personal things that we're moving through, and then it has incredible effects as it lives through other people. And so then, I didn't mean for this to be a thing that I kept talking about. It's just that I kept hearing from people, like I was crying hearing about vulture magic, like this is so inspiring for me. And so that's why I'm still talking about it, is like it just began to have a life of its own through other people, and just realizing how powerful it is as like an invitation to just let all life be part of what we're experiencing. Again, it's this idea of data and evidence all being on the table. Just like, yep, that relationship did happen. The good and the bad, the beautiful and the hard. And for me, it was a very like life affirming, participatory, sexy, erotic way of relating to my grief, which was very different than the way I had related to grief, like say through deaths I'd experienced in my younger body, where the only thing to feel was the pain, and that was so difficult to feel that I just didn't feel.
Yeah.
And so vulture magic ultimately to me is about like feeling life and letting it all be part of the deal, and trusting in like all of it, so that you can just keep basically getting pregnant with new, trusting that like new things are rolling in even as things leave, and it's just cyclical. And nature shows this to us all the time as the teacher, but I think that we're often cut off from the traditions of working with grief and death in American culture, at least.
Yeah.
So, and so vulture magic has just become a way of relating to the life, death, life cycle that I think is inspirational. I think turning to physics, biology, science for metaphysical support
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
is, really powerful to so many of us,
Yeah.
and inspires me way more than a lot of really beautiful teachings that just sort of feel flat to me. When we have these symbols, we have symbols everywhere, all around us, to inspire us and to give vigor and energy
Yeah.
to the processes of being alive and
Yeah.
healing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. That's making me think about how both science and esoteric magic looks to nature, right? They both are fields of studies that look at nature and then derive some sort of knowing or insights about it, And in many ways, I think they're kind of really bound together through a commitment to looking at the world around us and the world within us.
Yeah. I remember years ago when I was first getting into this path, I had heard Laura Valeda Vesta, a shared teacher of ours, say something like, "My grief is my service." And it just spoke to me like in ways I didn't understand, and just every 6 months, I realize how much more I have more context to all my younger self introductions to death and to having to be around death. Because in my midlife self, it's kind of it's kind of my zone for, I'm someone that people come to support them through letting things go, letting things die. And
Yeah.
I love it. I just feel like this is what I'm here for.
I hear Pisces magic there too. Pisces
Yeah.
as the last sign of the zodiac wheel. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to touch upon before we begin, winding this conversation down to a close that maybe I haven't brought up, Britten?
Well, in case it hasn't been, I think we've touched this, but I just want to underline again that there's really no shame in not being able to look at whatever emergent no. Let's please huddle the younger selves together who needed to not see. There's so much intelligence. That was how we survived. And I know there's a lot of grief in oh, can't believe it took me all these years. That's true. And it was from an emergence astrology perspective, everything's unfolding on time, and it was always going to be, X period of time, whatever. It was always going to be that Venus retrograde. It was always going to be that set of eclipses or whatever, where you've just come into a place where you have the capacity to get the support you need to build yourself up for what you're ready to say no to.
Yeah.
And likewise, we're always walking around not seeing everything. We can't see everything, And there will be a future us that says no to a thing that we don't recognize as a problem for us right now.
Yeah.
And just allowing that to just be okay, there's no shame.
Thank you. Thank you. So my last question for you is, um, from a human design perspective, we know that you are a manifesting generator, a 3-5 manifesting generator. So I feel like you always have all these different avenues. You know, you have this rich buffet of offerings and teachings and ways of working one-on-one with you that um, people can check out. So I kind of want to hear at this moment, this is, I think we're recording this October 2023. What are some of the ways that people can work with you and um, can connect with you?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's always shifting. I like to keep openness in my plans,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm always experimenting with that 3-5. But yeah, right now I have one-on-one offering only through my longer term container transformation.
Mm.
Truly is a support space for vulture magic, and is really potent. Like usually whatever someone's wanting comes through within them, like immediately, basically. So we could just only do the initiation, except I think the reason one trusts in kind of getting the momentum behind it is because you know that there's actually going to be 6 to 9 months with me, right? Those are beautiful. And then basically, I have two types of learning containers. I have the type where it's like an intimate community, where we all really get to know each other, and it's a space of love and vulnerability and magic. And it's these containers, we teach these containers, Jonathan. Those are really potent. And then I have lots of other types of containers that are more like transmission spaces, where I like let the language move through me and support people as they feel the waves of the language shift things around in their systems and in their lives. And so Unshaming the Signs is a monthly one. And then up next, I have Cave Space, which is across Scorpio season. I do it every year, but always differently. And that will be on this topic a lot in Cave Space. And then I don't know if I'll open anything again until Magician's Table in the spring, but we'll see. Magician's Table, as you know, Jonathan, we've talked about it on Healing the Spirit before.
Yeah.
Is a space for those who are coming into themselves as magicians, the audacity to name yourself as a magical person. And it's a practice space with colleagues to workshop what it's like to give readings or to grow like a more potent reading, or to really experience your magic moving through you.
Yeah.
So that's an annual one in the spring.
Incredible. Thank you, Britten. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your presence. And yeah, this has just felt so... I really felt this conversation in my heart, actually, so deeply. So thank you for weaving this conversation with me.
Thank you so much, Jonathan.